Welcome to One Step Beyond 2021. We're absolutely delighted to have, at the moment we've got over 100 of you from 24 different countries, such as the marvel of Zoom. And a special shout out to my friends at the International Wine Clubs Association. My name is Sophie Jump and I'm the co-founder of One Step Beyond with Richard Siddle from the Buyer. As some of you know, we launched last year in actually what proved to be one of the last events of 2020, both within our industry and globally. And the concept was born from a realization of the ever increasing and significant impact on the drinks industry of the interaction between consumer behavior, innovation and technology, man, mind and machine, if you will. And we both shared a desire to help the industry in some way to keep abreast and, if possible, ahead of these developments. So in 2021, we're really pleased to be able to continue this project, and that's thanks to our partners and sponsors. So just a very quick shout out to everyone, Miles Beale and his team at the Wine and Spirits Trade Association, and to our main sponsors who are PIX, which is a brand new state-of-the-art wine search engine, which is billing itself as the Google of wine. Its founder, Paul Mabray, will talk to us a little bit more about it later. To Stranger and Stranger, which is one of the most influential brand development companies led by the inimitable Kevin Shaw, certainly no stranger to most of us in the drinks industry. And also to Freixenet Copestick, which is fast growing internationally and also developing quickly its D2C arm through recent acquisitions of Slurp and Jascots in the UK. And we're glad to have the marketing director, Lucy Auld, with us today. So our programme, as we hope becomes the norm, is going to be fast and furious. We have 3 speakers who are going to cover the main trends that are driving consumers at the moment and that will impact on our industry. We're going to take a look at the current state of wine online, and then also we're going to talk about the phygital economy and the data-empowered, digital savvy individual. Richard will then host a sofa session, with Kevin Shaw and Lucy Auld. And they're going to talk about the interaction and the changing interaction between consumers and brands and vice versa. And then finally, we will, as a panel, address any questions you have. So please ask questions via the chat as you go along. Richard, do you want to say a few words before we kick off?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks a lot for all your time, wherever you are in the world. Yeah, just to reiterate what Sophie says, really, there's been such an unbelievable change, I suppose, in the last year. It may not feel like it when we're all stuck at home and we can't go anywhere and see people, but you know, there's been so much change. Even my hair, my hair getting bigger and bigger, but there you go. So yeah, over the next sort of 90 minutes or so, it's really a chance to sort of like try and explore some of those changes and hopefully give you some ideas to take back to your own businesses. If you want to sort of share anything on Twitter or Instagram or whatever else you might want to share on, use the hashtag OneStepBeyond. Also just to say, if there are any topics or themes that you'd like us to see us explore in our next sessions, then please contact myself or Sophie afterwards, and we'll be happy to do that, because obviously you're the ones on the front line doing things. We're the ones who are helping to report it. So on with the show.
Thank you, Richard. Alex, I'm going to hand over to you now. Alex Rire is the director of the Collaborators, which is a branding, design and marketing agency. Alex is going to share her screen. She was worried that she got an aubergine, but it's gone.
Oh, all good?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you, Sophie, and thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here in my study. Okay, so let me just... Can you still see that? No?
Yeah, it's good. You just need to put it in full screen.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Sorry, technical problems as always. Okay, so my focus today is on some of the biggest macro consumers trends that have kind of been evolving over several years, but I think they're going to continue to shape our decisions and our value systems in the years to come. And I'm going to focus on those shifts that I think have the biggest impact on the wine and spirits industry, particularly if we don't adapt to those changes. So the trends I'm going to look at are the virtue of values, climate diets, health is wealth, and life online. And on the surface, you know, none of these are new news, but I don't think the wine industry is doing enough to respond to them yet. And, you know, it really is going to be critical to the future of wine to do something about these. And it might sound a bit melodramatic, I get that, but here's the thing. The trends, you know, these trends are already changing people's behaviour. So we're seeing people who love meat cutting back on their intake to do their bit for the planet. We're seeing people who love cheese becoming vegan because of the darker side of the dairy industry. And we already know people who've cut back on their alcohol to safeguard their health. And my point is this really, that more and more consumers are prepared to make sacrifices for the greater good. And they're ditching things that at some point in their life they would have never imagined they could live without. So I think the wine industry in particular has to do more to accommodate these trends. And if we don't, I can assure you that will be other products that come along, and they might look like wine, they might not, but they're going to serve a similar purpose or a similar occasion, and they'll do it better. Okay, so let's crack on. Okay, so there's a new aspiration economy emerging where consumers are actively looking for the brands that have purpose beyond profit and can make a positive difference to the world. A global survey by Edelman suggests that in many countries, businesses are now more trusted than governments, which is kind of bonkers. And over half of people say that brands have a responsibility to get involved with at least one social issue that doesn't directly affect their business. And the thing that's really important here is that it's not a marketing driven bolt-on. It needs to be leadership driven and part of the culture in order for it to become a competitive advantage. So it's about action, not declaration. But done well, it does make sense commercially. And this Kantar Brands E-chart shows that brands that are perceived to be purposeful significantly outperform those that aren't. And it's enabled smaller challenger brands to take on and disrupt categories with big, well-established rivals. So these are now household names, and that has a lot to do with the fact that they have a clear purpose. And we're seeing more and more businesses across a host of categories and industries becoming B Corp certified. And in fact, the online retailer Ocado has recently launched a dedicated B Corp aisle. And these businesses have passed rigorous assessments that measures their impact on all aspects of their organisations. That includes employees, customers, community, and of course the environment. And there are now 3,928 businesses across 150 industries and in 74 markets. But really interestingly, less than 1% of those are from the drink sector. Okay, so, oh, sorry. We all know that the planet's in trouble. That isn't, again, new news. But I think the thing that is changing is our desire to do something about it. So a YouGov report found that 64% of Britons want to reduce their carbon footprint. And we know that diet is one of the most important things we can change to reduce our impact. So we're seeing increasing numbers of people adopting climate diets. And it's getting more coverage in the media. So in the UK, we've had TV programmes about it, and you've got things like on the BBC website, the Climate Food Calculator. And meanwhile, brands are already starting to put their carbon footprint on pack, and you've got the likes of Unilever and L'Oreal who will be rolling out carbon footprint labelling in the next few years. And there's also likely to be more legislation. So this year, the UK government is due to start consultation into mandatory carbon footprint labelling schemes, and they're sort of likely to be tightening up across the EU as well. So we're going to be seeing consumers scrutinising labels and wanting to know a product's environmental impact, you know, and that's not really going to fare very well for the wine industry. We all know that the you know, the vast majority of wine should not be in a glass bottle. But what's our solution to that so far? Well, you know, these aren't a silver bullet. Cans in particular account for double the greenhouse gases of plastic bottles in their production, and not to mention how toxic bauxite mining is. So I think we have to expand our definition of what wine is, and we have to reframe some of the things that might once have been dismissed or looked down upon and turn it into a benefit. If you take Piquet as an example, it's banned in the EU and it's seen as inferior because it's for farmhands. Elsewhere, it's positioned as a sustainable, low alcohol, refreshing summer drink. And this is Bespoken Spirits, and they're using technology to extract the key elements of barrel aging, so aroma, colour and taste, in a fraction of the time it would normally take. And their activator, as they call it, uses microstaves of wood that they've toasted and charred, and then it combines it with variables like temperature, pressure, churn rate and atmosphere to produce this aged, in inverted commas, liquid in just a few days. So this is like really horrifying for purists, but it gives them the opportunity to create 17 billion bespoke combinations. So that's like a massive tick for the personalization trend. And they can claim big environmental savings. So as they say, they're reimagining and replacing the antiquated and wasteful barrel aging process with sustainable science and technology. The result is 97% less wood consumption, 20% more spirit yield, so no angel's share. So isn't it time that the wine industry makes a virtue out of things that might previously have been dismissed? Kind of open question for everyone there. So for example, you know, is it time for Tetra Pak to finally take off? So this is just water, and the whole thing about it is its sustainability. So the packaging is this next generation carton that's 100% recyclable. It's made almost entirely from paper and plant-based plastic. And then there are other paper bottles starting to crop up in the mainstream. So you've got Johnnie Walker launching its plastic-free paper bottle this year. And there's the Frugal Pack wine bottle that's 94% paper. We're also seeing more plant-based materials. So this Green Gen recyclable bottles made from flax fibres. And this seedlip gift pack is biodegradable, recyclable and compostable, made from mushrooms, believe it or not. And it also comes with these little thyme seeds embedded in the gift tag. And then of course this reuse is one of the best ways to reduce carbon footprint. And barrel wines, as we know, in the UK has been using refills for years, but they've most recently launched a bottle return scheme for the UK on trade. So they'll collect the used bottles, wash and sterilise them, and they can be refilled up to 30 times. So it's a bit like a kind of classic milk bottle. Similarly, Eco Spirits in Asia has created this closed loop distribution system, and it supplies hotels like Raffles, Singapore and the Four Seasons with premium craft spirits in these glass canisters, and they can then refill, so the hotels can then refill those the display bottles, so you know there's kind of no impact for guests. And at a consumer level, Loop is expanding, and they've teamed up with big brands and big retailers to offer reusable and refillable packs. And then a kind of aside from that, Unilever is also just offering up its first ever refillable Dove deodorant in a stainless steel pack. So then on to health. So we know that people want to be healthier, and certainly the pandemic seems to have compounded that. And you know, it's a tricky one for wine and spirits. So you can see why the drinks industry has responded to this trend through kind of no, low and skinny drinks. But I do think there are opportunities beyond this if we understand that the definition of health is not just about physical health anymore. It's about well-being as a whole, which encompasses mind, body and spirit. So you know, well-being means different things to different people. So I think there are lots of ways that you can leverage the trend. For those who are looking for unprocessed and natural, here's something like really radical and revolutionary. Don't change the product, change the way you talk about it. So everyone's shuddering here, but these brands, you know, I know it's received a lot of coverage, but they're adding a bit of marketing spin and they're playing to wine's strengths in the context of wellness. So you've got Dry Farm Wines in the US, wine subscription service curating organic dry farm natural wines that they say have been lab tested for purity. And they've got a whole host of other health criteria that actually many wines have already. And of course, Aveline, I don't need to say much about, you know, but they talk about clean, delicious wines full of natural goodness and free from unnecessary extras. You know, people are, of course, it's a bit disingenuous, but actually they've just used a language that people understand. And I think that's something that the wine industry could do more of. Or, you know, you could make slight tweaks to the product, make it all about 0 sugar and 0 carbs. And then there's the idea of adding herbs and botanicals to make it healthier. So Sufferfest beer markets itself as the finish line beer for athletes and runners, and they add things like electrolytes, magnesium, potassium, and even bee pollen to the products. Then you've got Rock Grace, which is infused with crystal energy, botanicals and adaptogens. And Wildlife Botanicals is interesting. They call themselves bubbly with benefits. It's a low alcohol English sparkling wine, which they say has 15 to 60% of your recommended daily vitamins and minerals added to it. And we're also seeing botanicals and adaptogens being used to replace alcohol. So 3 Spirit Social Elixir has been described as booze-free but buzzy, and they use adaptogens to energize and lift spirits. And then EDI or ED or Endorphin Dealer Institute, they're using hemp and CBD to create this kind of similar feeling to alcohol. But you know, for some people, wellness just means balance and self-care, and that idea that a little of what you fancy does you good. So as we've seen with Sufferfest beer and or Sufferfest, sorry, I always pronounce it wrong, and this beer here, 26.2, it's the idea that you work out, you deserve a reward at the end, that debit credit. And we're also seeing mindful wine tasting events, digital detoxes on farms, so why not vineyards, and even drunk yoga sessions, which I think probably does push it a bit too far, but it does demonstrate how broad wellness is these days. So I think this last year we've lived our lives online like never before. And from a business perspective, it's removed boundaries and created new paths to market. But even with the restrictions lifting, I think you're going to still see the digital existence continuing at pace. There's this really interesting prediction from Euromonitor's Michael Becker, and he says, we may see a continued process where we'll eat fewer meals in restaurants, but we'll eat more food that's prepared by others. I think the 21st century is going to be all about putting prepared food within a click of every consumer. So clearly, a move away from restaurant dining is going to have significant consequences for the wine and spirits industry, and it supports the need to ramp up direct to consumer. But the days of just offering an online shop are gone. The new breed of direct to consumer brands are offering way more added value, and just like trying to counteract the choice overload and the lack of personal contact that comes with e-commerce. So you've got retailers like Move, which is a membership supermarket in the US, and it works with award-winning artisans to create daily staples that it sells at cost. And there's absolute transparency about who made the food, how it was made, how much the artisans got paid, and they make these little mini documentaries about each of the products. And every member also gets allocated a personal shopper so that you get real person contact and somebody that you can, you know, whatever your question you can talk to. And Bubble's this highly curated shop, and it specialises in ethical and wellbeing products. And the thing that takes it to next level is this combination of kind of stringent selection, but also the ability for consumers to shop really specific needs. So, for example, like diet or based around values. So if you want to support Black or Indigenously owned businesses. And they've also got this whole host of wellness experts who kind of curate their own picks. So just because food and drink might not be eaten in restaurants anymore doesn't mean people don't want an experience. So you've got the food delivery service DoorDash has teamed up with Snapchat, created these filters that could make you feel like you were kind of eating in the restaurant. And Domino's has just launched its first augmented reality pizza, so you can view it in full 360 before you order. And then really impressively, in Malaysia, Tiger Beer did this entire month-long virtual street food festival. And you could explore the streets with a customized avatar and order real food and real beers that would then get delivered to your door. So that's kind of, really, really engaging. There were sort of games and other activities that you could get involved with. And then this last slide of mine, it just completely blows my mind. But it's the idea that digital goods, like you can buy digital goods for people who want to spend time in the virtual world, and people are actually paying really serious money for it. So you've got Fresh, Hot and Delicious, which is an augmented reality restaurant specializing in digital desserts on Instagram. But this is where it gets really crazy for me. Someone's just paid $500,000 for an architect designed virtual house. So I repeat, a virtual house. And a designer collection of furniture is just sold for over $450,000 in less than 10 minutes. It just honestly freaks me out. And then there's the Gucci sneaker app that lets you create your own virtual shoe to use online. So as I said, for me, it's such a weird concept, but it's only a matter of time before someone creates a virtual wine store or a virtual vineyard. So that's me nearly done, but I would ask you, if you only take one thing away from today, it would be to have an open mind. We've got this really narrow definition of what wine is, but it really is going to have to shift if we want to create new generations of wine lovers. So I'm Alex Rire from the Collaborators, and we create brands with purpose. So if there's anything we can help you with, please do get in touch. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Sorry, I ran over a bit.
Thank you. That's great. Can you turn your video? We've got lots of questions, but as I said before, we're going to race through and we'll answer the questions at the end. And also apologies if the speed is a little bit snappy, but you will be able to look at this in recording afterwards. Paul Mabray, you've got a very exciting new venture you're in the process of launching called Pix, and you're going to talk to us now about the golden age of wine online.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be back to One Step Beyond. This is like really one of the conferences that's leading the concepts of innovation. And by the way, Alex, I loved all of your presentation, but you broke my heart with the clean wine. I have to be really open about that. Let me share my screen here. Hold on a second. What a year. All right. So I'm actually going to be much more positive than everyone else and really talking about the future of where we're going with wine online. I think even though we're all probably locked up waiting to get to the pub, especially Chief, the reality is there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing vaccination occur around the world. We're seeing the countries that bumbled the pandemic, the United States and the UK, recover quickly in terms of distributing the different vaccines and opening up business and our communities. It's been a tough year. I know that for everyone. It's been a lot of loss of life. It's been a lot of loss of business, and it's been challenges on all of us psychologically, physically. Probably the reason we're so into health and wellness is because we're trying to fix this long, terrible year. But in the wine industry, something magical has happened. We are awake to the internet for the first time ever. Most of you know me. I've been talking about wine my entire life. I'm going to say it out loud. For 29 years, I've been on stage, leading the path, trying to knock on doors and telling people, look, this is amazing. It's going to be a way that we can communicate and touch consumers. And oftentimes people would pinch my cheek and say, oh, you're so cute, Paul. When that's done, that fad is gone. We'll talk again. But that wasn't a fad. It was never a fad. And it's an amazing time in our lives. And I can't tell you how happy I am to see it happening, and how happy I am to seeing the ability for the internet to allow wineries around the world connect with consumers. It's a magical time. And it's not just one tier of the industry, it's all four cohorts together leading this innovation. Consumers, retailers, wineries, and wholesalers all together leaning into digital in a way that we've never seen in the history of the time. And candidly, at the exact same time. So there's this huge rush, almost like the gold rush in California back in the 1800s. There's also a lot of catching up, as I've said before, to do, because really the acceleration has happened unbelievably. People are moving online at an unprecedented rate. Everywhere around the world, businesses are moving on, and behaviors are changing for all of us in these different pieces. The different behaviors around, and these are the ones that are going to be important for us, around digital usage, e-commerce, the expectations of consumers. Remote working is here to stay. It was always kind of on the fringe there. The fact that we like to get entertainment at home. I think movie theaters are seeing a very challenging time ahead of them because you can actually buy a movie at home, in partnerships with Warner Brothers and HBO, that you can watch them at the time of release, which also means a good thing for us in the wine industry is that popping a bottle of wine, staying at home with your wife and watching a new release of a movie, or your kids, is a new trend. And there's more of that at home living. And yes, there is a focus on health, but to the earlier point, it's not just a focus on physical health. It's on mental health, it's on social health, it's on community health, it's on equality of and diversity health. There's a lot going on. And things that were not in our mind share a year ago are now the new normal. If you rewind a year ago, I never even considered buying food from a restaurant and having it delivered to my home. Now it's in our selection set with my wife and myself. If we have a long day, we're able to purchase our food and have it delivered. And we're very fortunate. We live in Napa Valley. So we have Thomas Keller and Chef Morimoto and some really fascinating, amazing things. But there's so many different things that didn't exist in our mental model a year ago that are now part of our consideration set. And whether that's grocery delivery, whether that's getting on an audio chat live, whether that's actually Zoom, which candidly, video conferencing has been around an incredibly long time, or even creating funny little videos and watching these little snippets as mini commercials in television has become the norm. TikTok is quite addictive, actually, as a Gen Xer. You know, they talk about it being a young person's platform, but we've all migrated and we're all using these different platforms. And what we've learned about the new normal is there is no new normal. I think that that's the thing about the wine industry that is going to be our biggest revelation and our biggest evolution going forward, is the fact that the only thing that's constant is change. And we've been really rooted in the land. We've been really rooted in tradition and annual thinking. And suddenly the world has become fast for us. And that's both a bad thing and a good thing, to be fair. But the reality of it is this adaptability, this change that's now becoming part of our DNA, is going to be a great component of how we sustain and actually attract new customers in the future, not just from changing the way that we talk about wines, but changing about how we talk about the wines we have to the consumers we want to talk to, changing the way that we lean into these new tools that are digital. And that's part of the consumer golden age on that piece. Wineries are definitely leaning into this new age, and retailers as well. The boom has been incredible for wine online. It's unbelievable. The wineries that had infrastructure pre-pandemic are now succeeding beyond belief. And these dormant, nascent wine companies like wine.com, which is like a 20-year slow success, has suddenly started to grow at exponential rates. Just like Instacart, just like DoorDash, buying alcohol online is now part of the consideration set. And whether that's buying from a winery or from a retailer, it's going to be something that people continue to consider and think about. And that's great for all of us, to be really honest with you. Unfortunately, it's been a bit like the K recovery, economic recovery for consumers. Wineries and retailers that did not have an infrastructure are scrambling to make up time on that piece. And it's hard. It's hard to learn that piece. And even the people that did have infrastructure are really struggling to formulate and harden the way that they're doing business. But that doesn't mean that it's not a great time ahead for us. It means that it's unlocked and we're all going to get smarter at it. And the last tier of the business, wholesalers have moved into digital in a really, really meaningful way. Southern Wine and Spirits is full bore into what's called proof, and Southern Wine and Spirits in the United States is the largest wholesaler. We saw Berkman do a whole DTC program in the UK that helped support retailers and won an award for it. And then RNDC partnered with which is the second largest wholesaler in the United States, partnered with an e-commerce provider to help substantiate small and medium brands to get them access to the market. That's unlocked. So those 4 tiers in one fell swoop are rushing into this new gold mine in this golden age. And where are the big changes that are occurring on a macro level? Well, it's around the 3 things that I talk about consistently. It's people, processes, and programs. So let me delve deep into that. The hottest job in wine in the United States, and I'm probably in the UK to be really honest with you, is around digital and e-wholesale. E-wholesale didn't even exist really over a year and a half ago, to be honest with you. I know there's lots more faces and names. These are just some of the more famous names here that I wanted to lay over. But these 2 categories are unbelievably in demand for any recruiter and needed and necessary. And it's hard to find people that actually have any meaningful experience in that. But let me tell you about the successes that these people bring to us. So Justin Nolan on the left, he runs Gold Line Wines. He just launched a wine brand, a digitally native vertical brand called One Brick Wines, from 0 to 6,000 cases in 1 week, launched only on the internet. Of course, you guys know Paulie Hammond, who's been working with Brooks Winery, creating great marketing automation, Kelly Burke. And on the right-hand side, these are the whole e-wholesale category. Candidly, that's probably the entire world's group of them. Maybe there's another 5 of them out there. And their job is to work for big, large wineries to manage companies like Instacart, Drizzly. They're managing Target.com. That's Wayne Dwayne from Constellation, or Karen Mitzel from Gallo. The talent and what they've been able to develop and build around how they're extending these brands online is blazing new territory that's fascinating and interesting, and also helping consumers find wines in new ways. And this knowledge, by the way, is not going to just be locked with these 9 faces that I have here. It will spread. And that's what's great about the wine industry. It becomes contagious. We share ideas. We've always been great about that, especially starting in the New World countries where we talk about different ways to do business. And really what they're all trying to understand is, are we eyeballs or are we cases? That's the core leverage. Are we getting your ability to share your brand with new consumers, or are we selling more wine? Programs. I've been on stage many times talking about things, or processes, processes. Everyone is reanalyzing how they're dealing with the way they did business, whether that's customer support. I've talked about customer journey maps. I've had more wineries map their customer journeys than ever. And everyone is reevaluating even the processes they're doing. Are they doing them well or not? This is a tweet from Auld where he went to a chatbot on a winery to get information, and it took them 3 days to respond. So they're reevaluating even the things they're doing. Are they doing it right? That's great. That means that we are actually leaning in and trying to do a better job for the consumer. And all of that is a rising tide raises all ships. And we're looking at processes of how we even sell wine via e-commerce or via wine club subscription. We're actually reanalyzing subscribe and save, new models to help people do that, and new ways to access customers at home, whether it's tasting packs or text messaging or Zoom tastings, which, by the way, I'm dead sick of, but it's now here forever. It's here to stay, whether that's a trade tasting, whether that's a conference like we're doing, or whether that's engaging with your employees. It's all here part of the mental model that we're moving, and that makes it easier to access people around the world. My PICS team is remote. We have Felicity Carter, who's in Germany. We have Erica Ducey, who's in New York City. We have myself in California. We have our CTO in Colorado. We're able to work remotely together on that piece. And the amount of program upgrades, all of these acronyms, CRM, CPD, all of these things, DAM, document, they're actually coming alive. Wineries are actually building these tools and adding them, which is moving faster. We're learning how to use them in a rapid and model. And we're investing more money into research and development. So if you know anything about research and development, it really fuels innovation, which fuels economic growth. That's amazing for our industry because we have not been investing in R&D for decades as it relates to the infrastructure to sell and market wine. We've done it for making wine and for managing distribution, but we haven't done it for selling wine and marketing wine. So this R&D is going like crazy, and you can see the infrastructure of so many support networks, whether that's City Hive in the United States that enables retailers, Shopify leaning into the wine industry, OpenTable doing reservations for wineries around the world, fulfillment companies like the Wine Depot or Wine Shipping, Thirsty enabling wine companies that are in distribution to sell wine DTC, but still manage distribution and compliance going at a rapid rate through Avalar. All of this is coming to life, right? And even for the failures, even for the struggles, there'll be ancillary and unintended good consequences. So I'll give you a small example of that. Proxy innovation comes from these tools that are out there. I'm not a giant fan of Clubhouse. I think people have seen that. I think that the ability to communicate is something that we've really leaned into, and we needed to hear people's voices. But the idea of social audio is here to stay. And since Clubhouse has come out, there's been 34 or 35 different social audio platforms that have launched. Most of them will die. Most of them will wither on the vine. Clubhouse may or may not survive when we're able to actually communicate in person versus have to get on a phone and try to do a giant conference call. But the tool of social audio will permeate through all of the other tools that we have, whether it's Zoom and we do a social audio get together and it becomes part of their platform, or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. All of these platforms are adopting those components so that we can interact better together. And let me speak to that even better. So that what that means is, in this gold rush, in this new movement, all of the companies like myself, Pix, and the money that we're investing, Vivino's $155 million that they just got for their Series D, Wine.com's innovation that they're adding and doing all these social events to bring consumers to buy, the Drizzly delivery methodology that's going on. All of this is going to fuel additional innovation. All of these dollars that we're investing into the market will create a better way for consumers to buy and interact with wine. Whether each of these platforms we're seeing, Som Select is doing where you can not have all of your wine shipped until you have a full case that's yours. So you can order bottles of wine one by one, and when the full case locks, it ships, so it saves you costs on shipping. This is innovation. It's small, little incremental innovations that, as we learn what works and what doesn't work, it drives the market forward. And for me, that is a great moment in time. That is really what the golden age of wine is going to be about. It's the fact that the wine industry, who's been asleep for so long, is now putting our dollars and our attention on something that has been driving other industries forward for a very long time. And the good news is, because we were late to the game, a lot of the tools that we're able to use are more commoditized. A lot of the ways that we're able to build cool tools are able to go faster. So, I'm building a wine search engine in 5 months that took other companies 20 years or 10 years to build. That's able to happen because of the modern technologies. So what that means is that we're all going to be better for it. So as I like to say with my Willy Wonka thing, innovation is 93% perspiration, 6% electricity, 4% evaporation, and a little bit of a butterscotch ripple. So thank you very much for having me back. And I'm excited for everyone's joining us in this journey.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. As fascinating as ever. I couldn't keep up. There's so much information there, but luckily we'll be able to look through afterwards. So our next speaker is Michael Becker, and I think I'm probably safe in saying that he's going to introduce you to the word and concept of phygital, unless you've already heard about it. So the floor is yours, Michael.
All right, so let's jump right in. And in the immortal words of Willy Wonka, we have so little to do and so much time to do it in. Wait a minute, let's reverse that. And that's really the point that I want to talk about today. Is we have a tremendous amount that needs to get accomplished in a very little amount of time, because we have become phygital beings in this age. And what phygital means is we are half digital and half physical. And in fact, I would argue, as was just discussed in our last presenter and Alex and prior to me, our digital self is in fact has more economic value to society and commerce than our digital self. And this is playing itself out significantly. So the broad theme that you need to be aware of and understand, and what's really the fundamental transition that's happening throughout society, is that we are connected. This connection is creating concern. And from that concern, consumers and your customers are desiring control. And ultimately, you as a business need to figure out a way to empower them to have that control if you're really going to have a modicum of success going forward. One thing that we need to think about when we think about ourselves being connected, connectivity and data and our personal data plays throughout every stage of our lives, from birth, play, education, work, transportation, health, money, tax, sex, religion, death. Digital is playing a role in every aspect of that. And we are increasingly collecting data throughout every one of those processes. In fact, your digital footprint establishes about 7 to 8 months before you're actually born. You know, that first doctor's visit, and you get and your mom gets the sonogram. That's when your digital footprint starts, and that will grow exponentially throughout your life and continue on after your death. The main question is, as digital beings, how do we manage this, and what does control even mean? By 2025, we'll be generating roughly 160 zettabytes of data worldwide. That's 1 trillion gigabytes. 25% of all this data will be created in real time through devices like IoT devices and mobile devices. 20% of that data is going to be hypercritical to our lives, 10% hypercritical in the sense of, you know, our health related monitoring and activities. All of this data, Cisco estimated back in 2013, over a 10-year period of time, would create $19 trillion in net economic value to the world's economies. And I absolutely see that playing itself out. And that's just going to exponentially grow more and more as time goes on. And in fact, just to think about the nature of what's happening here, when we consider this connectivity that's in our lives, by 2025, they estimate that every single one of us in developed markets will be interacting with an IoT device in our houses, out in the public, at work, every 18 seconds of every day. What that means is we will be leaving bits of our digital exhaust, our identity and our personal information out there in the world and into the data sphere every 18 seconds. And so I want to go back to kind of what both Paul and Alex were discussing. And when we think about this, like creating this new world, I want to bring you back to 1973 when the movie Soylent Green was created. And what the whole idea was, by 2023, the world would be running out of food. So what are we going to do? Let's churn up all of our undesirable people in society and our vulnerable people. Dye that meat green, put it into Soylent Green chips, and feed it back to the people. Essentially, the movie projected by 2023, the world's economies would be surviving by consuming the people. And in fact, I would argue we're doing exactly that today. We are consuming ourselves, although not physically, we're doing so digitally. And we're doing that through 3 primary concepts: our profile data, which is basically our attributes, our email addresses, our intimate data, our explicit data, our preferences; our labor data, which is basically our behaviors, the longitudinal view of our profile data; and then finally our capital data, the data that's being produced by our assets. And with all of this data happening and the fact that we're essentially digitally consuming ourselves throughout society, we are seeing a fraying in society. On one side, we have the connected society. We have everything that was just discussed by our previous presenters on how digital is fundamentally transforming all aspects of every part of our businesses, our government, our society, our value chains, our value systems. That is in contrast to the connected individual and that individual's desire for self-sovereignty and control over their information. And in fact, what we're starting to see from market is consumers are saying, wait a minute, I'm not so sure I'm getting the right value exchange back and forth between your use of all of this data, specifically when it relates to me as a data subject, and the benefits I'm getting back. And the reason for that is because of hackers, spammers, and leakers. Hackers that are stealing our data, spammers that are stealing our attention, and leakers, aka businesses that are misappropriating or misusing or misusing our data and attributes about me or our communities. May not be illegal, but it may not also be moral, or it may not be ethical, or it may not be transparent, or it may not be based on expectations. So there's a lot of issues that we need to be talking about when we go into this path. And you as a business need to be concerned about this. When the consumer says, on second thought, I'm not sure I really want to give you any of my personal data. I don't want to share with you my preferences. In fact, I don't want to give you a real email address. I'm going to give you an aliased email address. I'm going to give you an aliased credit card. I'm going to give you an aliased physical address. I'm going to give you as little as possible for you to know about me, because I'm really not trusting what's going on. And when we don't trust, what happens? I delete your app. I avoid installing your app. I stop using your service. I warn my friends about you. I avoid making online purchases about you. So the fundamental thing that we need to think about is, as we move into this digital transformation, we have to keep the data subject in mind and the sovereignty of them as an individual. Because what's happening is, this is not just about hackers and spammers and identity theft and the top level lines that we see on the news. This is about people's increased anxiety. This is about their loss of time. This is about their loss of money because they're now needing to buy and subscribe to identity and protection services to be able to recover from threats. This is about their loss of reputation when bad things happen in their data. This is, in fact, all about the scams and fraud that they're on the marketplace. And in fact, it's also about death. When your data is misappropriated or used, in certain situations, that can actually lead to death, such as a hospital rate who experiences a data breach, their death rates go up. Stalking crimes, a whole bunch of other issues can happen to that. But frankly, the other big issue for the individual is the loss of potential, because our personal data is an economic asset, and industry has been using this economic asset for its benefit. Great, I love my free social media site, that's wonderful, but there's so much more that I could be getting out of this data about me, and that is for me, and especially if I could be monetizing it myself directly. And that's the fundamental thing that we need to be aware of and consider. So there is a grand awakening that's happening in the marketplace, and let me explain that briefly. What's occurring is you have two confluences of rivers or digital engagement happening in society today. And this is a satellite picture of the Amazon. And what you're seeing right here is the Rio Negro, this dark black river filled with all this organic material coming up out of the jungle, and the Amazon River, which is coming up out of the mountains. And when these two rivers meet, they don't actually merge. And it's a natural phenomenon called the meeting of the waters. And what's happening is because their speeds, temperatures, and densities are different, when they reach the same riverbed, they actually don't merge. And you'll see this kind of bifurcated river for nearly 5 miles until the rivers actually come together. And I use that analogy because it's happening in nature. It's exactly what's happening in our digital world. We have this big data, big tech, 5G, AI, machine learning. You could pull out 100 numbers of different acronyms out there, where we are doing exactly what our previous speakers had talked about in the way we're leveraging all of this data experience to create a really rich and engaging and exciting experience for the individual. However, in the backdrop of all of this, remember, we're connected, we're concerned, we want control, and we want empowerment. The individual, the sovereign digital subject, wants to be able to actually have a seat at this table. And so there's an emerging concept called the personal information economy, where individuals are going to start to take control of their data. And you don't have to believe me, just let's look at the facts. So for example, worldwide, there are 130 legal jurisdictions around the world, GDPR, CCPA, et cetera, that are giving individuals legal salient rights over their personal data. The right to be forgotten, the right to data portability, the right to rectification, the right to disagree to automated processing, and a whole wide of other rights. You as an organization also then, because of those rights, are going to be obligated to be, instill a whole suite of new processes and services and requirements to ensure that you're in fact transparently protecting this individual. So what's going to start happening is, and what is happening right now, is this confluence of these two methods of consumer engagement are now coexisting in the same riverbed. You've got big data tech on one side, and you have self-sovereign identity tech on the other, where individuals are now starting to take self-sovereign control of their data. What does this mean to your business? I would predict within the next 3 to 5 years, especially for the high value walleted consumer, it means that within the next 3 to 5 years, you will need to start accepting a consumer's right to access, or their terms of access, rather than them having to accept your terms of service or privacy policy. If you want to get a hold of them, if you want to have direct communication or interact with them, your fundamental way methods of business are going to change. So where does all this start? Well, it starts with you becoming a polymath. It starts to realize that there's 5 core pillars that you need to consider when we're looking at the future of this next generation of digital engagement. First, it's a whole suite of technologies and protocols and standards that are all wrapped around this idea of enabling people to have self-sovereign control of their identity. And in fact, the WC3, the worldwide consortium that oversees the internet, its new standard layer on the internet is called the decentralized identity key, which is going to achieve just that, the ability to have people have self-sovereign control over their identity. It's about the new economic business models. What happens when consumers own and control their data? You might find at some point, especially for small businesses, managing data is like managing a nuclear power plant. It's plutonium. At some point, you don't want to become the next Chernobyl. So you might decide, let's not host this data. Let's just buy it from the individual in real time and actually do it in a transparent way. It's about the 130 regulations. It's about the open data mindsets, the self-sovereignty mindsets, and the social engineering mindsets that are out there. And we don't have nearly enough time to dig into those, and we can talk about those later. And it's also about the moral and cultural shifts, as was discussed in our previous, in the first presentation today. And the confluences of all four of those is politics, and how do we actually make this industry move forward. So really, this is what's happening in the marketplace, and there are fundamental changes with data being the primary catalyst behind all of it. So what does this mean to your business? It means that you need to start thinking about how you put a tactical and strategic plan together. You need to look at establishing trust. So what was referenced in Alex's presentation in the beginning, we're trusting businesses more than we're government. Well, I'm just about to release a 10-market global study with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum that suggests that we actually trust ourselves more than businesses or the government. We want to be in control of our data, because we don't believe that business and government are being effective stewards. And there's a whole bunch of other information that we can do around that as well. You need to realize that too, when the consumer starts taking control of their data, third-party data brokers, all of these data business models are going to struggle. And your ultimate #1 core asset of your business will be developing a direct database that is not just opt-in, because opt-in is in fact a fallacy, but is actually bi-directional exchange of information based on a trusted, transparent engagement. You'll need to be thinking about creating those multi-channel strategies, not just digital pure, but maybe you need to talk to people on the phone sometimes, send them some direct mail, and yes, have some other interesting new physical environments as well, because we still are physical beings. And then finally, look at all of these regulatory elements. Look at the 5 pillars of the polymath approach, but not just but particularly on the regulator one. Don't look at it just a legal checkbox. I'm going to check this, done, I'm compliant, I'm not going to get sued. Look at it as a means of differentiating yourself, as was discussed in our first presentation. If you can actually say transparently, we respect you as a sovereign individual, you get your data, here you go, this is how it's going to work, click this button, we'll give you what we have on you. Then the models will really change, and you can actually differentiate yourself significantly around the data. So a tremendous amount is going to change over the next few years. And all I can say is a nod to Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives 5 years. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Data is Chernobyl. That's what I've taken out of that. If you're not an Anglophone, I really admire you if you can follow Michael's stuff full of information and thoughts. Thank you very much.
And luckily you have recorded it, and you can reach out to me later if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you. It's our fault for imposing such time restrictions. Thank you very much, Michael. Brilliant. I'm going to pass over to you now, Richard, for your chat with Kevin Shaw and Lucy Auld.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. This is a bit more of a calmer session. Hopefully, we're going to be chatting rather than showing slides. But thanks for all the 3 brilliant presentations, and so much to take on board. And in a way, we don't really apologise for the fact there is so much information being thrown at you. The idea of the one step beyond sessions really is to try and really cover so much ground and give you lots of different ideas, because we're all from different parts of the business, and a lot of the themes that we've talked about already today are all themes that are relevant to us all in whatever we do. Over the next sort of 15 minutes or so, we're going to try and look at more at what brands and how brands have had to adapt, and what the consumer in general has been up to over the last year. And joining me is Lucy Auld from Freixenet Copestick, head of marketing, and all the way from Napa is Kevin Shaw from Stranger and Stranger. So afternoon and morning. Have you fed your chickens yet, Kevin?
Yeah, and the pigs. Yeah.
That's very good.
And the coffees. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay. Well, Lucy, if I come to you first, I mean, obviously you're managing, big brands like, the Freixenet, and Iheart brands. Can you just give us a feeling for what it's been like for you in terms of what you've seen from your customers and the consumer, and how they've changed, and then perhaps touch on how you've adapted to that?
Yeah, so I think, it's been a crazy year for everyone. I think very quickly in the first lockdown, we saw that real swing towards still wine consumption at home. And that obviously led to some quite scary moments for Freixenet, which is predominantly a sparkling brand. But that kind of quickly changed, and I think it's just that speed at which things have changed in the last year, as we are thrown into one set of regulations to another set of regulations, and how quickly consumers adapt and change their behaviour, accounting for that. So I think as a business, we did 5 big things. I mean, we probably had our busiest year, as I'm sure a lot of people did, and churned out a huge amount of work, and everyone was working super hard. But I think we probably, when I think back over the year, I think we did 5 big things that were really relating to the change in what was happening in the circumstances. So one was that right at the start of that lockdown, on all of our brands, we asked our followers what they wanted to see from us, because we were really conscious that, you know, they were being plagued with bad news stories, and so what did they want to hear from brands? And I think that was a really great thing for us to do, because very quickly we understood that actually consumers wanted to hear, wanted to have kind of cocktail recipes, food pairings, and they wanted some kind of just some engaging content, some entertainment. So I think they wanted a bit of light-hearted relief. They didn't want our brands particularly to kind of take on the doom and gloom that was happening. Another thing that we did was we responded to the general feeling of the nation, and we were able to go very quickly to market with Iheart Superheroes, which was an initiative that gave away 2,500 bottles to heroes. I think there was a huge sentiment around NHS in the UK and everything that they were doing, but actually that real feeling that there were so many other people doing massive jobs. So like the delivery drivers, the posties, people collecting our rubbish, they were still going out day after day. So this gave our consumers an opportunity to gift the heroes in their life a bottle of Iheart Prosecco, which we renamed Iheart Superheroes. The third thing we did is, in terms of kind of tapping into that trend towards still, is we launched Freixenet into still wine. So that whole thing about it being a celebratory, sparkling dominated brand, it's like, well, let's launch into still, and that was actually a really great thing to do. And then we also launched a purpose-led brand. So I think to Alex's point earlier, you know, social conscience is still really big, sustainability, all of those macro trends actually were heightened last year. So we launched Care for Wild into that space. And then lastly, the fifth thing that comes to mind is increasing our D2C capabilities. So bringing in Slurp fully on board was a huge element of our success.
So just, I mean, a lot of that is, I mean, is that far more than you would do in a normal year? I mean, just in terms of that kind of change and adapting and having to respond to what consumers, because obviously we've all been on this big roller coaster emotional ourselves, you know, is that a lot more than normal?
Don't know, we do a lot every year, but yeah, I think just that speed to market, probably, yes, and that ability to be so agile and get things out there quickly. I think it gave us the extra impetus to do that, because everything was changing so quickly. So it gave us that opportunity, and retailers were open to that as well, because they were like, God, things are changing so quickly. So if we had a solution to that, there was an opening there. Yeah.
So Kevin, I mean, obviously from your side of things, you know, working, I guess you're the one who's been thrown the projects. You're the one who's been asked to come up with solutions to what the brands are looking for. How would you just describe how you've seen the brands that you work with and what they're looking to do? What would be the kind of the key things there for you?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. It's been a weird old year. Obviously, the on-trade's been on hold, and all those projects have been put on hold, and they are just restarting now. So yeah. We can take that as a sign that something is going to, you know, things are starting to reopen and all that. We're seeing those reefs restarting. Out of all of our clients, I think the one that deals with the mass market, lower end across most of its SKUs has been the client who's killed it the most. Those mass brands, you know, not only that they're reassuring, but their distribution they're easy to get hold of, whether e-com or in retail, but they make life easier. And I think that's been a theme throughout the whole year is let's try and make life a little bit easier. And whether that's like ethical or just making things look special. You know, we all want treats now, so we're getting briefs in. Let's make it look like a treat. We're we're definitely throughout all of our briefs, and we're urging clients to think more about making their message easy to be understood. And you know, this is all about elevator pitches now. You're ordering things on an app, so your label needs to work this big on a phone. And it's a similar discipline that we've been doing in spirits forever. You know, your label needs to work on a back bar and all the light and the glitz, and we're taking that now into wine. You know, your message needs to be really focused and clear. And so you have that you know, that wormhole about asking yourself, well, what do you stand for? You know, that existential issue. What is it that I can say about myself? So Lucy's brands like Iheart, it's really easy to understand Iheart, and it shows how you can grow a brand if it's very clear what it is. It doesn't behave like a regular wine. It behaves. I think about a few years ago, all those flavored vodkas, right? That you would come out. It would start vanilla and then raspberry and all these things, and that's Iheart. It's got that excitement about it. It kind of acts like a seltzer. You know, it's easy to understand. So it's really, it's more important than ever now to have something that's really focused and has instant communication to people. Make life easy. Yeah, and also to work an Instagram as well. You know, Instagram now is on every brief. Make sure things work digitally. Labels and branding and messages have all got to be that elevator pitch.
Yeah, but I suppose, you know, the thousands of bottles of wine out there, or the thousands of bottles of spirits out there, obviously went into pandemic with their previous labels, and
yeah,
lots of labels, as we know, are incredibly complicated. They're all about the chateau, the appellation, the vintage. You know, what kind of advice or steps are you having to take with the brand owners in terms of being savvy online, or being fit for purpose in e-commerce? I mean, are there certain things that people can do who may have a very traditional wine label to make it simple? You know, to be able to cut through if you don't have a Iheart brand type concept.
Yeah, sure. And you have to look at your specific sector, and then you just have to dig and find something in the message or in the story. It's amazing how many people were doing sustainable or organic practices and not talking about it. And you know, we have briefs about, oh yeah, we've been doing that forever. I said, well, bring it to the front. You know, talk about something that is more than just a vineyard. You know, everybody's got a vineyard.
So Lucy, I mean, you mentioned that you well, for the first thing you mentioned actually was talking to your consumers online and using social media. Is that something that I know you were doing that beforehand, but is that something that you've really, because I guess, you know, you've not been able to go out, not been able to have tastings and do festivals and events. Can you just give us an idea of how you and your team have actually used social media a lot more this year, and perhaps give some advice on how you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, you're right. We have used it hugely more. We, instead of kind of going out there and getting consumers to try our products at events, we've done virtual tastings. I know Paul mentioned that. It's like, oh God, we've done so many virtual tastings. But you know, I think that is the only thing that we could do, and actually consumers responded really well to that. So I think we did one for the Freixenet stills on our Freixenet social channels, and we also did one for a few for Iheart. We ran a kind of program of them, one whereby our taster had to pair each of the wines with a takeaway. So poor Trish ended up eating all manner of takeaways all in one night, ending with champagne and fish and chips. So a pretty good end, but I think she was stuffed, and curry followed, or fish and chips followed by curry. It wasn't necessarily the greatest for her stomach. But yeah, so we did virtual tastings. We also used Facebook and Instagram a lot more in our paid advertising as well. So it became more part of a larger part of our media strategy. And that's probably where our key learnings are, that actually that performs so strongly for us because it's highly targeted. So you really limit on your wastage. We know that our target audience is there, and were there even more throughout the last year. They've increased their usage of social media by something astonishing like 60%, you know, and these people were on it already quite a lot. So it's a good place for us to be. And in terms of learnings, I think it's widely known that video content is generally more engaging than static, but we kind of did a mix and did some test and learns on that and tried different images, tried different copy as well. So just kind of honing our tone of voice or our call to actions, but also that those kind of links through to purchase have become more important, and making sure that you're making that, like to Kevin's point, you're just making it really easy for consumers. And so if they're seeing your kind of wine on their social media, like make it super easy so they can then go and purchase it and they don't have to go and find it somewhere else.
And is that social spend, do you find it's having a mixture of messages? So one could be about the brand and what the brand is, one could be a simple click here to win a holiday, but to click here to buy wine, basically. I mean, is that a case of like thinking through different sort of what's going to work for your brand to different kind of consumer sets?
Yeah, definitely. And also having that mix of messaging, like you just said, it isn't just always about showing the wine and talking about the wine. It's also making sure you understand your consumer and what their interests are, so that you're broader than the wine. And that's especially true of Iheart, which is very much more a lifestyle brand. So we're tapping into what else are our consumers into, and making sure that we're kind of relevant to them away from wine as well as in wine. So our kind of competitions or our brand partners, we're really looking to broaden the appeal of our brands.
So Kevin, I mean, in terms of, I mean, we always sort of think of you as being, well, I think of you as creating labels, creating bottles and designs. Has the move to a lot more digital? Are you a lot more involved in creating sort of digital design and making those social adverts look good, or finding ways in which digital can take that brand concept and actually then make it work on digital as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think now through the whole brand and how it's going to be presented. It's not just a label and somebody picking up a bottle. Yeah. A lot of the time now, people are just going to see this digital footprint of the brand, and it's in wine in particular. I think so we now get asked to do things like celeb pair-ups, and in the past year, it's not so much influencers, but definitely more on the celeb side. We've had more in the studio, I think, than in any of the previous 20 odd years. And it's understandable, you know, there's no festivals, there's very little movies. That it's understandable that that people would want to be a part of now brands in order to generate income. So and it's fantastic, and it can really work well. I mean, we've created a shop brand, paired it up with a mixed martial art outfit, and it's just killed it in its first year. So you have to think now about everything more than a label, and way deeper.
It's a bit like you hear about sort of people who record producers who aren't just creating a record anymore. It's all about having that 5-second jingle within a song that's going to work on an advert, you know.
Absolutely, and authenticity is really important now. I think just attaching different things to brands, people see through that now. They're so savvy, they're so digitally savvy, that you need authenticity and to be integral.
So if someone's coming to you with a brief then now, and if they haven't got that digital element in it, are you then going back to them and saying, yeah, great, I can make a really nice label, it'll look lovely on a shelf in Tesco or on a restaurant table? Are you sort of saying to them, but you're missing half the story here now, or more than half the story potentially?
Yeah, I wouldn't even think about a brief now without thinking it in a full 360. It's way more than that now. And obviously we especially in the spirit side, we create bottles for every brand, and that's very tactile, and it's very it's all about the sensuality of having something in your hand. But that's further down the line. You know, it takes a year to make a bottle, so people are still planning to come out of this. And I think that's the challenge, is to think about now and plan for the future at the same time. Very difficult to get all of that in one. But what this COVID thing has done is I agree with Paul. I mean, it's changed everything. We're not going back to how it was.
Yeah, but Lucy, I mean, you mentioned the challenge for a brand manager like yourself or a marketing manager is having, that short-term immediate plan, but also keeping a vision of what the brand's got to go to? What has that become a lot more intense?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, because you do want to be agile and be able to respond so that you're relevant for the now, but equally you don't want to kind of dilute what your brand is about, and you've got to maintain, you know, to Kevin's point, that authenticity. So you can't just kind of chop and change depending on, you know, what's happening in the wider world. But I think having that balance of being able to move with agility and to flex your program is really important. So whether that's kind of putting a greater spend against digital versus online shopper marketing versus in-store shopper marketing, for example. But equally, it's like for Freixenet, you know, that's all about celebration. The whole positioning is about celebration. It doesn't mean that just because we went into lockdown and this massive pandemic that we should change our brand positioning and what the brand is. It's really important still to maintain that. It's just about sensitivity around your language or your kind of your activations that still make and keep your brand relevant. But you can't change who you are and what your brand is you know, and that's important to stay true to yourself as well.
Yeah. So Kevin, I mean, Alex started the session off really well with some really kind of mad stuff that's going on in other sectors with other drinks products, to be honest. But what kind of things are you seeing, or from what Alex was saying specifically, that you think can really apply to drinks in terms of what elements going on in other categories we need to be really aware of and actually, you know, take the most notice of?
I think for sure the big change we've had this year, and that's gone through so many briefs and projects that we've been on, is the sustainability issues. I don't know whether it's people are kind of, you know, trapped in the house and kind of scared and broke, and that they're starting to think about how can we make things better? How can we make the world better? But there's definitely, from the client side, there's definitely been a lean in towards that sustainability. So everybody's trying to, as I think we saw with Alex's presentation, paper bottles. We've been doing some ourselves in the past year, and again, you have to be really authentic about that. It's all very well being nodding towards it, but people will see through it and pull it apart really easily. So you can do. I think we're doing a bottle that is that's made to be collected and refilled. So you know, and design, that's a challenge, because you can't use a paper label. That's going to get kind of scuffed and gnarly really fast. So you can do that on a local basis. You can collect and refill bottles and be properly sustainable in that aspect. And so we have to make bottles more able to last, and the printing on them to last. And so there's some really interesting challenges about it, but you've got to be authentic with it as well.
I mean, would you pick up on Paul's point? It's a golden age for digital, but it's also a golden age for someone like yourself in terms of what now brands can do, and the opportunity for them to do things.
There is a massive opportunity, but then it does depend on the sector. I mean, in the canned market, we're seeing lots of things going on. In the spirits market, it's always innovation through liquids and bottles and packs. The rate of change and innovation in the wine industry has been glacial for the time that I've been involved, despite me banging my head against the wall. So I would love for this time to be a golden age, and I would love for wine to be able to evolve a little bit. We're seeing it with some brands, but I think it would be great if there was a more widespread change.
Right. Okay. Well, perhaps if the other panelists could click on their videos, and just Lucy, just to finish our little discussion. I mean, you mentioned there about there's been so many different macro trends that we went into the pandemic with. I mean, which for you are the ones? I mean, Kevin there mentioned sustainability. Which are the ones for you that have really been on fast track and are actually going to be here, and we're really going to have to focus on for coming out of lockdown?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sustainability has just heightened in lockdown. So completely agree that that's one to stay and will just get bigger and bigger. And I think it is interesting. You know, we launched Care for Wild, which is a sort of social brand giving back to a charity, and that social responsibility is just increased as well. So I think that there's a real opportunity for brands too.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, just thanks for all the other panelists, and as I say again, thank you for your time and your brilliant presentations. And just to reiterate, it's all been recorded, so if you missed things or came in late, we'll be sharing it through the buyer and on social media channels in due course. Just picking up on, I know this is quite hard to sort of surmise all your talks in one question, but one thing that kind of struck me, and I think Paul really identified it, is actually this is more of a people challenge as much of it is a business challenge. Can you perhaps just sort of give an idea of the kind of people or the skills that you think the drinks industry in general is going to need in the next sort of 5 years that we don't have now? And if you are looking to spend money on new people, where would you advise we do? Shall I go to Alex? Your
well, I think as I sort of closed on really, and it's to follow up on what Kevin was saying, I think the wine industry does have to evolve. It lacks innovation. I think open-mindedness and bravery are quite important, actually, moving forwards, because you know, if you don't put your head above the parapet, sometimes you just become bland, unforgettable. So sorry, and forgettable. You know, so I think for me it's about people that are brave and prepared to put their money where their mouth is, see something through, you know, wholeheartedly. So it's that, again, that authenticity. It's really, really important. You can't just pay lip service to, you know, you got to go for it.
So I mean, Michael, I mean, your talk was perhaps the most forward-thinking. What's going to happen to us all in the next sort of 5-10 years? I mean, how does a company even start to contemplate? And you mentioned the idea that they're going to have to change the way we deal with our consumers in terms of data. So what would be your first hire to help you do that? You going to do your audio, Chief?
Yeah, it really starts by privacy by design. Really, it starts with thinking about your product. And it starts with your customer journey, as Paul was saying. And what I would do is I would suggest that you map your customer journey. You think of every data touch point that happens throughout that journey and flow it out and understand where you're collecting data, why you're collecting data, what data do you need in your business to be able to be successful with having a transparent and trusted commercial exchange with your prospective audience. You map all of that out, and then you can be adherent to the regulations. You can be of service to the individual, and it really just boils down to have the mindset that you are going to be of service. That your job is to fulfill the needs and desires of your customers rather than them filling your coffers. And you need that bi-directional exchange. Privacy has now become a luxury good and people are paying for it. And so think about how you will have that new relationship with your customer. So there are a lot of tools and services that you can do. Remember too, as a business, you could get sued to oblivion if you don't get these privacy regulations right. So there are some really great tools and services providers that you can work with to make sure that you do get the regulatory frameworks right and you do put the right systems in place. So if anybody has any questions or comments or wants to reach out to me about that, I'm happy to give some recommendations.
Yeah, Paul, yes, I mean, our session is all about consumer innovation and technology. So Paul, for you, who you built your team at Pix, what kind of skills do you think a modern wine business needs to have?
That's a really great question, Richard. I think that the challenges we have is that the skill sets are so wide and the specialization is so broad now. So a marketer doesn't just market, they have so much they need to do, and they're between digital branding, display ad, messaging. As it relates to digital, we just really need to start dipping our toes in that category in general and creating specialists, and really starting with the broad-based specialties first, which is things like digital advertising or e-commerce. And then we can specialize as we gain more income. I know Lucy's probably dealing with this problem all the time. How does she expand the team to get what she needs while achieving success? So it's kind of an incremental step, but it's a tough thing because we're starting at a deficit You know, there are specialists. Social media is not even just one category. There are specialists in types of social media, you know, whether you're a Clubhouse or a Twitter or a Facebook or an Instagram specialist, that costs money. It's hard to be a generalist anymore. So again, digital advertising, digital marketing, and e-commerce as a first step, and then moving past that, you know, into CRM and all the specialties that go underneath that.
And quickly, Lucy, before there's got a few questions coming through now, and from your point of view, what kind of people are you looking to try and bring into to Freixenet Copestick?
I think it's people with that omni-channel kind of experience, really. I think, you know, digital is so important, and the challenge for us is how do we make sure that we stand out, because it's such a crowded space, obviously, that we all know about. But I think it's really important for us to recognise that although our shopping habits and our habits have changed fundamentally, there will still be a high proportion of people who revert back to how they were before. So I think the latest is that 60% of people will stick with the new habits that they've got into since kind of lockdown. That's still a huge number of people who will revert. So it's making sure that you've got that omni-channel presence. So in terms of people, it's having that experience in kind of traditional bricks and mortar, but also then a lot of experience in this new digital space, and how do we win there?
Brilliant. Okay, we've got a question here from David Gates, who says he spent 27 years working at Diageo in spirits and 2 at Brewdog, and he's asking why is it that we think that wine has been so slow to innovate, which I guess is the $1 million question. But Kevin, do you want to throw that one at you? I mean, I know this is an area of frustration for yourself, but compared to the likes of Diageo and Brewdog, I mean, why do you think that the wine trade has been so slow to change?
Well, I look at the innovations within the wine trade, and there aren't many. Obviously, we're still using the same bottles and bits of wood rammed in the top that we were using 300 years ago, except for screw caps, you know. And I remember when screw caps came in, and people said nobody's going to drink wine with a screw cap. No, it's just not going to happen. And I do remember our old friend Helen at Tesco standing up and making a stand. And it was refreshing for me to see a retailer really get behind something. And they own the real estate. And if they make a stand and they really push this, we can change things. But at the moment, we've got a situation where they're just sitting back and saying, give me your goods. If it fails, you pay for it. If it doesn't fail, I make money. And that's the key for me. We need retailers to stand up.
Yeah, Alex, can I ask you the same question? Why compared to the sectors that you work in, do you, or perhaps you don't actually think the wine industry is innovative? It's
a really good question, and it's a really interesting one. I think, you know, if you think about spirits spans, there's so many different types of spirits, and some are very high end and sort of about connoisseurship, some are quite rustic, and I think just that lack of conformity means that it's easier to sort of diverge away from expectations. Whereas I think wine, you know, if we're talking classic old wine, you know, it's bound by so many regulations, by so many expectations, that it's quite hard to push against that. And I'm working on a project now where the concern is always, but the wine trade aren't going to like it. It's not going to, you know, we have to be really careful about the language that's used, otherwise it'll be seen as gimmicky. And, you know, it's always about this kind of hesitancy to upset the kind of establishment. And I think that is a real challenge for people.
And I guess we've also, you know, we've just seen this week, you know, it's a product that's dictated by the weather. You know, all the frost we've seen this week, you know, it's not like you can just make more.
Yeah, it takes a long time to make it, doesn't it? So it's very difficult to be as agile. It's not like a spirit where you can just, like, you know, put it through a column and then out comes your product and you can adapt it. Wine does take time. It's not easy to move, and I think that might also have something to do with it, for sure.
Okay. Christian Parkinson has a question here. It says, do you think the on-trade will have to develop elevated pitches for the wines they want to sell, and be less about the liquid and more about the whole package. I guess we've kind of touched on that a little bit. I mean, Lucy, from your point of view, you're talking a lot more about the brand than necessarily the liquid, aren't you? Or is that just because I'm asking those kind of questions? But is that very much how you see it? It's very much about the brand rather than worrying about the blend of the grapes and how they're made and the soils and the terroir.
Depends on the brand. I think definitely for Iheart, that's not something that our consumers want to hear about all the time. They don't want to hear about how it's made. They just want to know that they're getting a really great wine for a great price that they're going to enjoy. Whereas for Freixenet, those consumers do want to hear a bit about and be educated a little bit, you know. So it's just really understanding your consumer and making sure your consumer's at the heart of your comms.
Yeah.
Richard, I was just going to say, I'm looking at the chat and people are talking about, you know, what about glass bottles? You know, there's always a place for glass bottles. And you know, absolutely 100% there is always a place for a glass bottle. But I think what I'm talking about is innovation at that lower end of the market, that really quick turnover wines, which should not be in glass bottles. So I absolutely agree, for age worthiness, for, you know, very high quality wine that's going to be aged, of course it needs glass. Okay,
I mean, I'm aware of our time. Probably got time for perhaps a couple more questions, but the one that strikes me that in Paul's talk, he talked about the 2% of butterscotch ripple, which so I'll come to you, Paul, and explain what you actually mean by that. But I'm assuming you mean the pizzazz at the end of it all. I mean,
it's the Kevin Shaw effect. It's the creativity. It's that magic brain that he has that, you know, does that thing, those interesting customer touch points and caring. I think that's the pizzazz that happens in the 2%. You know, the rest is commodity based. I think we need to learn how to differentiate and target our markets differently. I know Kevin does this in his briefs a ton, which is, you know, if I hear another winery say family owned, even the word sustainable, no offense, is great. But when we're all saying it, how do you differentiate? How do you make yourself different when everyone's saying the same thing? That's where the pizzazz and the butterscotch ripple comes in, and that's what Kevin does in spades.
Yeah. So Kevin, where's your butterscotch ripple come next year? What do you see as being the way that the market's going to change, and what are consumers going to be looking for?
I am contractually obliged not to talk about things like that.
Well, but if you got, don't tell me you've got a butterscotch ripple brand coming out.
Something incredibly similar, weirdly, yes.
No,
I know. The liquids have got to change. You can't just. I mean, I can get one of 6,000 Pinot Noirs here. Why do I need that? You know, and it's not. We get in with that in every other sector. We're getting more interesting flavor ideas, more product ideas, and you get authenticity then. Something comes from somewhere out rather than just being another Me Too. And it's exactly what Paul said. If I see another wine that says we're family owned and we go great with your meat pie, I'll just, you know, walk out of the room.
So, Michael, you're not actually from the wine industry yourself or the drinks industry yourself. What's your take on this conversation?
Yeah. Well, I'm not, but I have consulted with and advised a number one, and I'll never forget, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in the boardroom of a major wine manufacturer, and I was talking to them about the digital elements that Paul was discussing, and I said, you know, this is happening. It's going to happen soon. And the board's reaction was, we made the decision not to do that in 1986.
Okay.
Right. And that was it. That was it. The conversation was over because they made the decision not to do something 25 years ago. I think the biggest challenge is there's a lot of investment, a lot of history, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of leadership that, you know, isn't digital. It's not personal for them yet. And so therefore they're not seeing the need for the change. And so if we're going to fundamentally move this industry forward, we need to find a way to have leadership experience digital. And I would actually challenge many CEOs and many senior executives, spend a week of your life interacting with your business only through your mobile phone. Right? Don't go to the store. Don't go, only do it through your mobile phone, and see if you would want to have that experience after a week. And if you do, great. If not, make some changes. So I think that's the fundamental issue is just, and the other thing too is we've invested so much money in building up our sales channels and our services. Disrupting that is really hard, and justifying that disruption is really hard. What, you want me to do this, but I'm making billions over here. Like, so that's just noise. That's the mosquito in the room. But that mosquito is going to, over time, get pretty darn big. So I think it's time.
That's a great way to sum up, actually. It's a brilliant, and as I say, our whole point of One Step Beyond is to look at the consumer, the innovation and technology within the context of the drinks industry. So I think you've really kind of captured what we're trying to do. That does bring us to the end today. I appreciate there's lots of little questions going on, but it's quite hard to bring in questions into a conversation. So hopefully you don't mind that. Just to say thanks again to all our panel, to Alex, Lucy, Michael, Kevin, Paul. Obviously, thank you for all your time. Sam and Jessica doing all the clever stuff behind the scenes. And as I say, we will be writing all this up on the bio, and we'll be sharing the video. And the plan is to run 3 more of these events during each quarter through the year. So we'll be sending you more information about that. So thanks indeed. Sophie, do you want to come on and say finals thank you, or goodbye even?
Yeah, sure. No, you've pretty much covered everything I was going to say. Just to reiterate, the recording will be circulated. If any of you who have attended have particular areas of interest, do let us know, because we're here to address issues that concern you. Our speakers were brilliant. Thank you for everyone who's had to get up early. Those of you who are in far-flung, wonderful places. In the meantime, look after yourselves, everyone. Get yourselves vaccinated so we can have an event soon. And get yourselves down the pub if you can. Thank you, everybody.
One step beyond. Thank you.